Back to Couch Casual. Today, we're going to be going over our Week 10 power rankings for the 2025 season. And without further ado, let's get straight into these power rankings. So our first tier of teams we have are the Titans at 32, the Jets at 31, the Saints at 30, the Raiders at 29, the Dolphins at 28, and the Browns at 27. Titans and Jets, I kept them at the bottom two because Titans lost to the Chargers by 7, and the Jets didn't play. I mean, the Titans had honestly a chance to win that game. Their special teams gave them a chance. Their defense gave them a chance with that pick 6. But the offense continues to struggle. I think they are still clearly the worst team in the league. And the Jets, again, also one of the worst teams, but they didn't play. So I felt like it was just fair to keep them at 31. I flipped the Saints and the Raiders. Saints were originally 29. Raiders were 30. It's just because the Saints got blown out by the Rams. Yes, a very good team. But the Raiders almost had a chance there at the end to beat the Jags. Tyler Lockett was wide open, but the pass got deflected and they lose in overtime. But they almost beat him. So, for that reason, that is why they went up, flipped with the Saints. And then the other two teams, the Browns and the Dolphins. The Browns didn't play this week. But another team we'll get into next year is the reason they went down a spot. And the Dolphins just didn't look good against Baltimore. So they went down one spot, as well as the other team going up also boosted them to, or caused them to go down a spot. But overall, this is the tier of, I think, the consensus worst 6 teams in the league. These are the only teams that have 2 or 1 win, 2 or less wins. So these are the bottom 6 teams. Next tier of 6 teams. We have the Commanders at 26, the Bengals at 25, the Giants at 24, the Cowboys at 23, the Vikings at 22, and the Texans at 21. Commanders at 26. Anything that could have went wrong that game against the Seahawks went wrong. You lose Jaden Daniels. You lose Luke McCaffrey. You lose Marshawn Lattimore. You lose the game by a lot. And it just hasn't been a good season for the Commanders. The reason they're not in that bottom 6 tier is because 1, they have 3 wins. All those teams have 2 or less. 2, they do have a lot of injuries, including that quarterback position. And even with Mariota, I still trust this team to beat these 6 teams most times they play. I mean, we literally saw them beat the Raiders earlier in the season. So they still are at 26 above those teams, even with the injuries. Then the Bengals at 25. I know they didn't get a win against the Bears, but Joe Flacco looked great. The offense looked great. What do we expect? The defense looked terrible. What else do we expect? They've been competitive thanks to Joe Flacco and the rest of that offense. So I think they're better than the Commanders, the Browns, and the Dolphins, the teams that were above them before this week. Giants at 24. It wasn't a pretty game against the Niners. Jackson Dart actually played a pretty solid game. I still will take them over the other teams, but they obviously didn't show me enough to move them up. But I also think losing to a, yes, injured, but still good Niners team isn't the end of the world for the Giants. And again, they've been a pretty decent team for most of the season. And that near Broncos win looks better and better as the Broncos continue to play well. Cowboys at 23, recording this just after the Monday night game ended. It wasn't good for the Cowboys. Honestly, I'm still taking them over the Giants and the Bengals, but it just wasn't good for Dallas. Now, you'd think that maybe you should go lower for getting blown out by a 2-5 Cardinals team. And I only had them going down 2 spots. It's just because I already had them at 21. I was already low on them anyway, so that's why they only went down 2 spots. Other people might have them go down more, but they might have just been a little higher on them going into that game. Vikings get a big win against the Lions at 22. I know they only went up 3 spots, even though they beat my previous second best team in football. It's just because they just have shown too much inconsistency. Now, maybe with McCarthy back, this offense can show more consistency. The defense can show more consistency. And if that happens, then obviously I will continue to move them up. But just what I've seen through the first 9 weeks, I don't want to put them too high, but it was a very, very impressive win on the road at Detroit. So, got to give the Vikings that. And Houston, I know they didn't win against Denver, but they almost beat Denver without Stroud for most of that game. And they've been a competitive bad team for a decent amount of the season. So I will take them over. It was tough between them and the Vikings, but I think they've been a little bit better than the Vikings overall. But if the Vikings continue to ascend, they obviously will pass Houston. Next tier, we have the Falcons at 20, the Cardinals at 19, the Bears at 18, the Panthers at 17, and the Jags at 16. Falcons at 20, tough loss to the Patriots. They should have at least tied it there, but they missed the extra point. Drake London had a great game, but despite that, they couldn't get it done in Foxborough. Can't punish them too much for a 1-point loss on the road to a very good Patriots team. But when the Cardinals, Bears, Panthers, and Jags all win, it's hard to move them above any of those 4 teams. But they're still a solid team nonetheless. Cardinals at 19, big win against the Cowboys, blowout win. Defense played fantastic. Offense looked very good without Kyler too. I know it's the Cowboys, so you can't take any offensive performance too seriously when it's against the Cowboys. But Trey McBride played really well. Marvin Harrison looked fantastic. The run game was decent. Jacoby Brissett played very well. But I think, again, can't take too much into consideration with any offense going against Dallas. The one thing I was impressed with was the Cardinals' defense. Now, I've been saying the Cardinals' defense has been pretty decent all year long, right? I'm like, this Cardinals' defense has played pretty good with, some of the additions they got, like Will Johnson, Josh Sweat. But holding the Cowboys' offense to 17 points is pretty impressive. And one thing I noticed about that game was Walter Nolan made his rookie debut, and he played great. So if the Cardinals' defense can continue to play like that, they might be able to start stacking some wins because they've almost gotten some wins. They were competitive in all their losses. So the Cardinals could be on the rise here soon. And then the Bears at 18. I know they got a big win against the Bengals in the game of the week. But the only reason they went down is because they beat the Bengals. They barely beat the Bengals, who I had at 28, whereas the Panthers barely beat the Packers, who I had at 8 going into the week. So that's basically why those two teams flipped, because the Panthers, very impressive win. Rico Dowdle continues to play great whenever he's on the field. Defense looked very good, stopping a very high attacking Packers offense. They limited them. They get the win. They go to 5-4. And then the Jags, I know they moved down 2 spots for getting a win. First of all, the teams that were below them got more impressive wins, in my opinion. And they barely beat the Raiders, right? Like, yeah, it's impressive for the Raiders to barely lose to the Jags, but it's not a good look for the Jags to barely lose to the Raiders. Offense played pretty good. Defense, not so much. Still a good team. Still in that upper half. But I don't want to put them in that next tier necessarily, just because it hasn't looked good the last 2 weeks for Jacksonville. They came off that great win against the Chiefs, and then you go out and you barely beat the Raiders after getting blown out by the Rams and then losing to the Seahawks as well. So not the best 3-week stretch for the Jags, but still a good team. Next tier, we have the Ravens at 15, the Steelers at 14, the Niners at 13, the Packers at 12, and the Broncos at 11. First of all, Ravens and Steelers, as I mentioned, were also played a role in the Jags moving down 2 spots. Ravens get a nice, easy win against Miami on Thursday night, and Pittsburgh gets a huge win at home against the Colts. I feel like Ravens make sense, you just beat the Dolphins. But I feel like the Steelers, you could see why the Steelers only move up 1 spot after beating the number 1 team in the league. they just haven't been very consistent for me, right? Mainly the defense. The defense has been pretty bad most of this season. I mean, guys like Joe Flacco, not that Joe Flacco isn't is like a horrible quarterback, but Joe Flacco went off against the Steelers defense. Jordan Love, again, not that he's bad, went off against the Steelers defense. And then Justin Fields went off against the Steelers defense. Those are just three examples. The Steelers defense just hasn't been good this season. Until last week, they played very well. So that's why I didn't want to put them too high, just because I don't know what version of the Steelers defense we're getting. And the offense also hasn't been necessarily the most consistent unit ever. So that's why I'm tempering my Steelers hype, even though they beat the number one record team, Indianapolis Colts, in a pretty dominant win. The Colts got a touchdown late, but that didn't really mean much, to be honest. But I was very impressed with Pittsburgh. San Fran at 13, you get a blowout win. Not blowout win, but a relatively easy win against the Giants on the road. Good win for San Fran, but still going to keep them at that 13 range. Packers at 12, ugly loss to the Panthers. Did not play great. The Panthers just beat them. I mean, it wasn't a great game, honestly, from the offense. Defense played good for the most part, but the offense definitely let them down. Special teams as well. Can't lose to the Panthers at home as as 2 touchdown favorites. Still one of the top teams, but when you lose to the Panthers and the teams above you get wins, you gotta go down some spots. And then the Broncos at 11, just outside the top 10. I know they're 7-2, kind of similar to Pittsburgh. I haven't felt the most consistency from the Denver offense. Their defense has been great all year long, but we expected that. It was what can we get out of the Denver offense, and they've been very good at times. I know it was Houston's defense, so no offense is gonna do well against Houston's defense, but they're still very good. But I'm gonna leave them outside the top 10 just for now. And in that next tier, in that 10 through 6 range, we have the Chargers at 10, the Patriots at 9, the Chiefs at 8, the Lions at 7, and the Rams at 6. Chargers at 10. They also, beat the Broncos. That plays a little bit of a factor in it, but not really. Chargers get a big win, not big win, an easy win against the Titans. It honestly wasn't as easy as maybe it should have been, but still been a very good team. Not much to really say about beating the Titans. Patriots get a big bump up, 3 spots to number 9. I already know people are going to say it's low for the Patriots. I understand. But their schedule's been very easy. We can't ignore that. And they haven't been blowing out all of the bad teams they've played. They've also lost to teams like the Raiders. So they're still top 10. And they're still climbing, just because if you keep winning, you're going to keep going up. But there's just so many good teams. There's so many teams with also with 7 wins, as well with 6 wins. But very impressed with the Patriots overall this season. Then 2 teams that dropped, the Chiefs and the Lions. Chiefs, not their best game against Buffalo, but we knew they were going to lose to Buffalo. Like, Buffalo beats them almost every time in the regular season. Then they just beat them in the postseason. But it still wasn't the best game for the Chiefs. They are 5-4, so the worst record of this top 10 here, but their offense has gotten so much better for the most part with Rice back, and you still trust that defense. You still trust Mahomes, so they're still a top 10 team in my opinion, even if the record doesn't necessarily show it. But they do got to get back on track. Well, they actually have a bye this week, I'm pretty sure, so we'll see how they come out after the bye. And then Lions at 7, very bad loss to the Vikings at home. Once again, still a top 10 team, still one of the better teams in the league. But another team with a low-ish record, I think at 5-3 is the Lions record. They've kind of just beat down on bad, outside of beating the Chiefs, or they lost to the Chiefs actually. You get blown out by the Chiefs, and then for the most part, they've kind of just beaten up on bad teams. I mean, you can't blame them for doing so, but they don't have a necessarily, outside of beating the Bucs, they don't really have a big win, right? You lose to the Packers week 1, You blow out the Bears, you blow out the Ravens, or not blow out the Ravens, you beat the Ravens, you blow out the Browns, you beat the Bengals, and then you lose to the Chiefs, you beat the Bucs. That was a very good win. And then you lose to the Vikings. It hasn't been the prettiest season for the Lions. I still think they're going to make the playoffs, and they still have a very good chance to make a run, but they definitely haven't been as consistent as the 6 teams above. And that's a big thing for me, as you can notice, is how consistent these teams are. Rams at 6, big win against the Saints. The Saints really didn't give them much of competition there in that game. But Stafford's looked great. Puka came back and then got injured again, so hopefully he's not out too long. But with the record you're sitting at, maybe you can handle being a little cautious with him. But Puka looked great when he was in. Devontae Adams continues to be very good in the red zone. Defense has been super good for the Rams. They're just a very good team on both sides of the ball. Would not be surprised at all if once again they make another good, solid playoff push. But finally, our top 5. At number 5, we have the Buccaneers. They didn't play this week, bye week. I was very close to putting the Rams above them, but the Bucs did have a bye week, so I didn't want to punish them for not playing. So I kept them at 5. I know the Lions beat them pretty easily 2 weeks ago, but they also just lost to the Vikings as well. At number 4, we have the Indianapolis Colts going from number 1, 3 spots down, to number 4. It wasn't a pretty game at all against Pittsburgh. A little bit of a wake-up call, probably. They didn't have the hardest of schedules, and now they're coming into a pretty difficult schedule. They played the Pittsburgh Steelers and lost. They still have to play the Seahawks, I believe. I think they still have to play the Chiefs. That might be the game the Chiefs have off the bye week. I'm not sure. So we'll see how the Colts can recover after their first real test and failing that test. I guess they also lost to the Rams. So the 2 times they played good teams, they lost. Like really good teams, they lost. They're still 7-2. They still were so dominant on both sides of the ball through the first 8 weeks of the season. I don't want to overreact too much. But if they continue to look like this against really good competition, they will start to go down the rankings. But right now, I still think they're one of the better teams, and I'm still going to keep them at number 4. And at number 3, we have the Buffalo Bills. Big jump going from 9 to 3. They controlled that game for the most part against the Chiefs, right? Mahomes didn't look too good. James Cook had, once again, another good game. That's back-to-back very good games for James Cook. Josh Allen continued to look like his normal self that we know from Josh Allen. I think he's now favorite to win MVP after that game. And the defense was the most impressive part these last 2 weeks. The defense has looked very good the last 2 weeks. If they can keep that up and have an average defense, they'll continue to look like the Bills that we know. At number 2, it's the Seattle Seahawks going up 4 spots from 6 to number 2 after their very dominant win against the Commanders on Sunday night. That defense is legit. Leonard Williams, Witherspoon, Wolin, Josh Jobe, just to name a few. Nick Emenwari's played fantastic in his rookie season. And then on offense, you have the best receiver this season statistically in Jackson Smith-Njigba. Sam Darnold's playing great. They're just great on both sides. Mike McDonald is having himself a pretty good case for Coach of the Year, in my opinion. And I think the Seahawks are at least a top 3 team. And I'm going with number 2, which leaves number 1, the reigning Super Bowl champs, Philadelphia Eagles. I know they didn't play, but the Colts had to go down from number 1. The Lions had to go down from number 2. And that left the Eagles to go up to number 1. They looked very good the last few weeks. Jalen Hurts has impressed me these last 2 or 3 weeks. And if he continues to play very good when he needs to pass the ball, if Saquon can get it going and continue that momentum from the last time they played, we all know their defense can be good. They're still going to be they're still probably going to be the favorites in this to make the Super Bowl. And right now I have them as the number 1 team because the top teams, they let us down, mainly the Colts and the Lions. And that allows, even though they didn't play the Eagles, to jump up to number 1. And that will conclude our power rankings for Week 10. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're new, and comments down below your opinions and some of your quote-unquote rankings 9 weeks into the season. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.